Right, so what I was going to try and do in this video, like I said, I'm going to try and do, is explain bow making, but kind of simplify it a bit. And I thought an idea what you could do if you wanted to practice as well, but instead of practice a lot of time and effort making big bows, it might be a better option to actually practice just making a small pygmy bow or like a bush bow. It will take a lot less effort to do. You can use smaller wood, and I'm sure it would definitely be easier. So a couple of things that I would first say is, first of all, kind of looking for wood. So you'd be looking for hardwoods, things like fruit trees and nut trees are good. People say you can't make bows out of softwood or stuff like pine, but the thing is, you can, but everything's got to be done in a certain way. Because people said you couldn't make a bow out of pine, and someone had made a bow out of pine, but he made it very wide, very long, and he could only get like £30 draw weight out of it, and it had to be backed or something. So anything is possible, but you have to do things the right way. Right, I'm going to try and explain this, but more than likely I'm probably going to forget stuff. So best thing to do, if I forget anything or you need to ask a question, just ask one. So fruit and nut trees, hardwoods, in the UK and most, well, not everywhere, but so I know, if you know what I mean, yew is an excellent bow wood. I've made loads of different bows out of loads of different woods, and yew, I'd succeeded nearly every time with it, whereas some other woods, out of 5 bows, let's just say 4 of them failed and 1 worked, if you know what I mean. But I've made short bows, long bows, flat bows out of yew, and it's worked every single time. One key to bow making is seasoning wood. You do really need to season it if you want a proper decent bow which shoots good. But there is ways, and the thing is, I've covered all these kind of things in videos before, but I may go over them again, or I will go over them again. But you can quick dry wood and stuff like that. There's no need to have wood drying for like 10 years before you make it. You can quick dry them. And one way is you rough your bow out of green wood. I will do a video on this. Rough the bow out of green wood, but keep it equal. You know, equal sides, equal thickness. And then once you've done that, and you strap it to a board, because what will happen is, as green wood, if you've cut green wood, as it dries, it will warp and twist, and that's what will happen with a green bow. It will take a set, and it will warp and twist and everything. So I'm gonna make like a little short pygmy bow out of this. This is a seasoned piece of yew. Later on we'll do some videos of making greenwood bows, and we'll strap them down to a board, stuff like that, so we can quick dry them, see if they warp or not. I'll just try to think of a couple of other things. What you're really looking for is wood which is not very knotty, if possible. This has got a few knots, it's got a couple of big branches, but there is ways of dealing with that as well. So that's got a big, what would have been a side branch that creates a knot. This has got quite a lot of little branches that create pins, but there's ways to get past all these kind of things if you're careful. So we'd want a straight bit of wood with not a lot of side, or not any side branches if you can. Alright, so remember, we're making a short bow. This, so you can kind of practice, copy this, and then that way it doesn't take a massive amount of time to do, and you won't be too bothered if it does snap. So what we really want to do first is we want to start cutting wood away only from one side. Start cutting wood away until this wood starts to bend. So when you push it like this, it will start to bend a bit. I'm going to look along it and see which area has got the least knots and pins. And this area here looks to me, it's got one here, one on the side, but it's pretty clear all the way along. Whereas you turn it this side, you've got lots of side branches, the big one there. So this, and this is another thing, this is going to be the back of the bow. No, this is going to be the belly of the bow, and this is going to be the back of the bow. Now this is where things can get complicated for people, because there's all terms and stuff. Just remember this, the belly of the bow will face your belly, if that makes sense. You hold the bow the right way around, the belly of the bow faces towards your belly, and the other side is the back of the bow. And what you want to do is take wood away from the belly, but not from the back. Right, this is just my method, or a method, so you don't go wrong. With you, what people tend to do is, because they want heartwood and sapwood, they have to take some of the back off, but then they have to put some sort of backing on it or deal with that. But that's when things can break. So what we'll do is we'll make a point of most of the bows, or all of them, of not ever touching the back of the bow. Because once you start cutting into this, where you've cut it, if you've done it slightly wrong, that's where the bow can break, and it makes it a weak point. But if you don't touch any of this, it's much more likely to last. And then what we need to do is cut away from the belly of the bow, and you want to make this bow so it arches, curves over equally, but has still got the strength to spring back straight, if you know what I mean. Well, so as I go along, I'm going to try and explain other things if I remember them. I always find it hard explaining stuff, and I just find things sometimes better to just do it, if you know what I mean, like demonstrate it rather than explain it. The first thing I want to do is, remember, we're only making like a little short bush bow or a pygmy bow. It's not going to be much good for anything but shooting targets, but this is going to be excellent practice, and you'll be able to practice something like this at home. You haven't got to get massive bits of wood. You could practice this with green wood, and it's not going to take a lot of effort because it's only going to be small. You're not going to be hacking loads of wood. So the first thing you want to do is find the middle. So this is about 30 inches, so, well, 30 and a half. We'll just do it over just 15. I'm just going to mark it. Just lightly mark it there, so we know that that's the middle. Now there's lots of techniques to making bows. Most of the steps will be the same, but some will be slightly different. For example, you could make it with just an axe and a knife, or you can put this in a vise and use a spoke shave, a draw knife, stuff like that. But we're just going to do it simple. Now the first thing is, which I'm just going to tell you one thing. Right. Now, I could put a knife on the top of this, and batten it down, and split this down the middle. But that doesn't always work. And if you're limited to wood, you want to do the method I'm about to do, which is actually chopping it off. But you could save a lot of time by putting a knife on the top and splitting it all the way down. But what can happen is sometimes it will start coming down, and it will twist, and it will split all the way down the middle, but it will come up like a propeller, and then you've just got two worthless bits of wood which are no good for nothing. And if that's the only bit you had, then you've just ruined it. So what you might as well do is, if you chop away then you know you're getting it right. So we only want a small handle because this is only going to be a small bow. And also what we're going to do is we're not going to worry about draw weight or anything. We're just going to get this bow bending. So that's going to be our back and this is going to be our belly. So what I'm going to do now is chop this away, and once I've got it a fair bit, I'm going to start bending it like this. Watch where your legs are so you don't swing and hit yourself in the legs. Make sure you're on something sturdy. Not quite bending yet. Got to be careful because this bit here is definitely more narrow than this. So I'm going to leave this one for now. I'm going to go on to the top one, or the other limb. I don't know whether that's going to be the top yet or not. So what you can do is disregard a handle and let this bend all the way through, which may be actually the best bet. We still want to leave a little bit. Disregard me cutting that bit. I'll explain that in a minute. Now you need to look down it like this and make sure you're not propelling it. So this is flat all the way along, not like this, and then this part like that. So now we've got that, it's pretty much halfway through. So that would end up, so that's how it would end up if we had split it. So now we're going to take a little bit off the sides, just flatten them off. I always find this bit hard. Not when I'm facing the belly of the bow, I find this bit okay, but when I've got the back of the bow facing me and I'm cutting the sides, I always think I'm doing it wrong. So that's what we got so far. Right, now when you're making a bow, or you're gathering the wood for making a bow, you want as wide a tree as you can possibly get. And you want to get the back of the bow as flat as you can get it. But obviously, because of the way we're making them, we don't want to touch the back. So the only way you're going to get a flat back on it is by getting a big diameter tree. That's not vital, but it does help, because the flatter this is, the less likely it is to break. Because, alright, if I can explain this to you, as it's bending on this on the ridge of the curve, like imagine this bottle, this part here, this is going to be taking more of the pressure on where it might break. But when it's flat, it's kind of using more of the wood, if you know what I mean. if I can think of a better way to explain that later, I will. So now what I want to do is take the tips in a bit into where they should be a little bit. And all the time that's taking wood off and it's going to make this bend more. I'm only doing the last few inches like this. Keep checking it, looking at it. Make sure you're not accidentally making one tip over there and then one tip over this way. And I'm going to take a bit more off this bottom limb and the handle area. Because I want this to bend quite a way throughout it, because it's only a small bow, but we're not going to give this a lot of power or anything. This is ideal for practicing. A little small bow like this, you could make it, give it to a child or something if you don't want to keep it. But it's ideal practice because it's so much smaller, so much quicker to do. Like I said, don't worry about the draw weight or anything. Bending a little bit, you can see. Only a little bit. Right, now one thing, I said this before in another video, this is seasoned yew, right? Now what happens with seasoned yew, now this is properly seasoned, when you're making the bow, the bark wants to come off and you'll hear this cracking and all of a sudden you think, oh, I've just broke the bow, right? But all it is the bark cracking, right? Now what you can do, which is another thing I forgot to say, right, you can do some stuff to the back of the bow. Alright, remember, belly to belly, back away from you, right? The back of the bow, the bit that faces away, you can debark this, but you need to be careful. If it's summer, you can normally just peel bark off. But in the winter, you may not be able to, and what you might need to do is scrape it off. But be very careful once you get to the wood underneath, because you don't want to put slices into that, because that is potentially where it can break. I'm going to work this down a bit and then we'll come back to it. Right, so now we've got to this point, what we want to do is perhaps stop so much chopping, and we're going to start using a knife. Right, this is this method. Remember, like I said, you know, there's other methods where we could have done this, put this in a vise, used a draw knife and then a spoke shave, stuff like that. And we're not going to do that. We're going to use kind of bushcraft tools to do this. I'm going to use the big knife, which I love using this to make bows. And what we're going to do now is just start. This is why you need a block, because you could keep going like this. Need to be careful. Now you can do the back dead flat or slightly D-shaped, curved over. Sometimes I find it's easier to do it curved over, like D-shaped. All we're doing is literally, it's just removing wood. There's no real I'm just trying to think of how you call it. There's no not much skill to this at the minute. Because all we're doing is removing wood. Remember where your fingers are. And remember where your legs are as well. And the handle on the knife's holding up alright. See it bending? That's what you want to keep doing. Just keep taking wood till it starts bending. Right, now I'm going to go on to a slightly smaller knife. The same thing, just carving wood off. All you got to do is, as you're doing it, make sure you're not doing any really thin spots. So you're not coming down, you know, and then you got like a really narrow bit here, but you've carved too much. You need to make sure it's got to taper down, but you don't want sudden thin spots. If you get any really bad knots, just don't carve those as much, but carve each side of them. Like I said, this is my method, but right, I think I might have a slight thin spot there, so you want to go either side of that and not take so much wood off there again. So I'm just going to keep taking wood off and then just going like this, hand in the middle, hand at one end, and just seeing what it's like. And even if you're doing this and this just snaps now, you've still had a lot of good practice anyway. Don't think it won't happen, because it can. This is why people don't like bow making, because you could make all this and it just snap. But that's the way it is. But making a little bow like this is a lot quicker and easier than making a great big long bow or a flat bow. I'll keep going like that and then we'll come back to it in a minute. Right, you can always, if you can get this in here safely, you can always hold this like this and use a big knife like a draw knife, either pushing away. But as this starts bending a bit much, then it's not going to work so well. The other method, if you've got something to push it against, but you need to be careful though. So it's just carving, and then this is what they call floor tillering. Put it on the ground and see what it bends like. Now you heard some snapping there, but I reckon, yeah, it's alright, so I can see it. It's the bark cracking. Now you've got to remember, because this is a little small bow, this isn't going to bend back like full draw like a proper bow is, or a large bow is. Now what we can start doing now is using just with the knife straight on. So just scrape like that now. You want to go all the way up and down it though. Keep going like that for a bit. Right, I've done a bit more on it, and as you can see, your hand in the middle, that's bending a lot more now. So what you want to do is you just keep going. Making sure you're not doing any thin spots where you can snap it. If you don't touch this side, you know it's probably not going to snap from you hacking away at this side and doing an accidental deep cut or anything. But so you've got less to worry about. You just make sure you're not cutting too deep and you don't suddenly get a thin spot here. So I keep looking, thinking I've got a thin spot there. Not sure. It doesn't seem too bad actually. Right, I'll keep going. Just exactly what I'm doing. Then we'll come back again. So once we start getting it to bend like that, what you now want to do is make sure you also haven't got any stiff spots. Now I did want to try and get this to bend in the handle as well, but my handle to me seems quite stiff, and all it means if it's gonna bend in the handle, that more of the bow is working, and because it's such a short bow, it'd probably be better if more of the bow did do some working. I think it's only later on in the bow making is when you need to start being more careful. At first, you might as well just hack away and get it done as quick as you can. Start hacking and hacking. You're not really going to do much unless you go really over the top. I hope you can see this. And later on, when you actually try it with a bigger bit of wood, you're just doing exactly the same method, but this is easier with a smaller piece. Don't ever just think you can just get it and bend it back. That's how people snap them as well. Once it starts feeling a bit too hard, you give in, let it go back again. So I'm just going to keep taking more wood off until it starts bending back to where we want it. So remember, at first, don't complicate things by worrying about getting it a certain draw weight and removing wood off the back. So you've got heartwood and sapwood or whatever, and you want to back it. Just leave this be. The only thing, if you are going to do anything to it, is if you want to do anything, remove the bark, that's it. Because this just simplifies everything if you do this. My arm's aching a bit. Don't bother with anything but debarking the back. If you want to work on the belly of the bow faces your belly. Hardwoods is what you need most of the time. And then just keep cutting, and then hand in the middle, bending and seeing. And even if it snaps, you've still got a lot of good practice, because look how far you're getting it now. The thing is, like I said with you, you'll hear cracking if you leave the bark on, but it's sometimes more hassle getting the winter bark off than just leaving it and putting up with the cracking. In the summer, if you cut this, you'll get the bark off this easy. Just peel off with your hand. Right, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to cut 2 small notches in. We're going to put a string on it. And what you want to do when you do your bows, you want to make sure when you do the tips of the bows, you don't want great big fat massive tips. You want your tips to be as small as you can get them. You see, these are small. But I know this is a small bow, but I would try and get the tips of the bow as small as you can, even if this was a big bow. Because as you got your string on here, you pull back the bow, you let go. If you've got a lot of weight here, it's like it kind of swinging a heavy club. If it's lighter, like a whip or a cane, it's going to whip more forward, if that makes sense. So what you want to do, get it bending good, and then once you got it bending good, you want to put a string on it, but you don't want to put the string on it as it should be. There might be a pure chance, sorry, I've stood up there, you might have a pure chance that it's actually ready to have a string on it properly, but more often than not, that's not the case. Because what you don't want to do is really stretch it hard to put a string on it and then break it. I'm going to get a string for this. I'm going to have a look. I'm only going to put a little thin string on this, as it's only a little small bow. Right, now what I've got here is a small bit of nylon cord, right? Now this is probably regarded as by far one of the worst bow strings or strings you could use for a bow. But use what you've got, but other things will perform better. You could buy a proper string, have a string made, but if you're just starting, either use something like bank line or paracord. But the only kind of thing you need to remember if you're doing stuff like that is you want string which is non-stretchy. That's one of the most important things. Non-stretchy string, and then as long as you get that right, you're kind of halfway there already. But you can get all proper bow strings. I've just tied a small loop that in. Proper bow strings. But you're just practicing, so don't complicate things. Just use what you've got. Right, now the step through method on this is going to be very hard to do. So what I may need to do is just get this on here and try and force it down. Now you can see how that's bended. That's what you want to look at. You can always stand in a mirror and look like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the string on. I'm going to carry on just shaving some off like this. I'll do each limb once you don't cut your string. So ideally you want to get a proper bowstring, but if you're just practicing, paracord or bank line will just about do. It won't be the greatest performing string you're ever going to get, but it would work. You'd be able to shoot an arrow from a bow. Right. I'm just going to have a look again, and then we can keep going like that for a little while. Right, now this is what I meant earlier on with on the U. If you can't get the bark off, it will start splitting. You'll hear these cracking noises. Now look, see that? But it's not the bow breaking, it's just the bark coming off. If you get any bits like that, there's no one there, just peel them off, and then that'll stop making that cracking noise. I managed to get the string on a little bit higher now. Now this is where you need to be careful. You don't start pulling this back too much, and you've got to remember that this has all got to be relative to each other, because now this is a tiny little small bow. This isn't going to go full draw. This is only going to go a little bit, maybe even here. Right, so I'm just going to work it a bit more. All the way along. Turn it over, carry on. Right, now all I've been doing is I've kept the string on, and I've just been, with the knife flat on, just been scraping up and down. So more bits of bark I've lifted and come off, but that's fine, because the back of the bow is completely intact. I reckon that might be ready to go. Now what I'm about to say is going to contradict, or it's going to seem to contradict everything I've just done. But when you're making a bow, a full-size bow, two things that can help a lot are, one is make the bow as wide as you can, and two is make the bow as long as you can. But making a bow which is wide and long takes a lot more effort than doing a short, narrow bow. You know, this has took much quicker to make, and most of it I've filmed it. Whereas when I do big flat bows or longer bows, half of it I can't film it because it'll be filmed for. It takes not all day, but a fair few hours to shoot if you really filmed everything. And I've just done this evening and filmed most parts of it. So this doesn't look like it's got any really bad stiff spots or anything. Not like I'm looking on the camera screen. It looks pretty good. You've got to remember the draw isn't going to be full draw, and you have to remember that. So what you could do is make your arrows accordingly, or mark them. You don't want to go too far, because give this to someone else, they'll just pull it back and snap it. I'll see if I can find someone to just give this a shot. It's a really good way of practicing. Right, so this is the bow, pretty much finished. Tiny little pygmy or bush bow, and what I've done is I've made this very small arrow, or it's almost like a dart rather than an arrow. But that's the thing, everything's got to be relative. If you put a great big arrow like this in it, this isn't going to work. It all needs to be relative. So it's a bit dark outside, so what I'll do, I'll shoot this in here against that bit of wood, so you can see it in action. It's got no tip on it, it's just flat wood, but that's made, what it's doing is hitting the wall and bouncing off. Not sure what the draw weight is, but it's actually got a bit of oomph to it. Surprising. See if I can get a better angle. I'm hitting high for some weird reason. Well, nearly smashed that end up now. What I might have to do is later on see if I can make a proper arrow for a proper point for this. You can see that's penetrating through there. So that's a good way of practicing bow making, by making yourself just a little short, small pygmy or bushman's bow. Much quicker and easier. Once you perfect this, you can then go on to making bigger bows. Right, anyway, cheers for watching, and I'll see you later. If you liked that video, then why don't you share it with your friends, and also if you want to see regular videos like this, then subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot for watching. If you want to get full notifications from my channel, go to this little gear symbol next to where it says subscribed, click on that, and here where it says send me all notifications for this channel, click on that and then save it.